There's someone in your house. That was the first thing I heard when I answered the call, her voice trembling so hard I could hear her breath breaking between words. And for a moment, I thought she was joking. Or mistaken. Or maybe she'd simply gotten spooked by the shadows in my hallway, the way sunlight sometimes slipped through the curtains in long, strange shapes. But then she whispered my name, so quietly, so desperately, that every sound around me seemed to fall away. Miss, please. I think someone's upstairs. I was standing in line at the pharmacy when she said it. I still remember the faint medicinal smell in the air, the beeping of the billing machine, the impatient shuffle of customers behind me. Yet all I could hear was that woman's shaking voice and the sudden thudding of my own heart. The line moved forward, but my legs refused. My mind darted back to that morning, how rushed I'd been, how I'd barely checked if the back door locked properly. I'd hired the cleaning lady for the first time that day. Her name was Marisol. She was soft-spoken, somewhere in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. She reminded me of the women from my old neighborhood, hard-working, careful, grateful for any job they could find. She wasn't someone who scared easily. I knew that from the way she'd walked into my messy house without a hint of judgment, almost humming to herself as she set her bag down. So if she sounded scared, something was wrong. Marisol, I whispered, turning away from the counter, tell me exactly what you heard. There was a short crackle, then a soft thud on her end, like she'd pressed herself against the wall. I heard footsteps, she murmured. Slow ones. Not mine. They came from the room at the end of the hall. Your bedroom. My bedroom. The one place I always kept neat. The one place only I ever entered. The one place that held the last pieces of my old life, before everything between me and Mark had fallen apart. I left the pharmacy without buying what I came for, keys shaking in my hand as I rushed to my car. I tried to speak, but my voice came out thin. Are you somewhere safe? Can you get out of the house? I'm by the kitchen, she said. Near the back door. I didn't want to make noise. I didn't know if I should run. A car behind me honked as I fumbled with my seatbelt, heart pounding. I didn't know what terrified me more, the thought of a stranger in my home or the possibility that it wasn't a stranger at all. Because deep inside, beneath the fear, was a suspicion I hadn't allowed myself to voice. One I'd been trying to bury for weeks. Marisol, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, listen to me. Get outside. Right now. Don't wait. Okay, she whispered. I heard the soft creak of the back door opening, then a burst of daylight-filled sound, wind, distant traffic, the bark of a neighbor's dog. And then, faintly, behind it, another sound. A floorboard. Heavy. Behind her. Her breath hitched sharply. Oh God. Miss, someone is here. The call cut out. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. And on that drive home, every single worst-case scenario clawed at me, my mind flipping through memories, doubts, and the quiet, nagging feeling I had been ignoring ever since my marriage started splintering apart. Something told me this wasn't random. Someone was in my house. And I already feared who it might be. I don't remember half the drive home, just the trembling in my hands and the sharp taste of adrenaline rising in the back of my throat. The streets blurred past me, and every turn felt slower than the last. My mind kept replaying Marisol's last breathless whisper. Someone is here. I called her twice. Both calls went straight to voicemail. Her phone rang, once, twice, and then that hollow beep. It felt like hitting a wall with no way around it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my heart was thudding so hard that I felt it echo behind my eyes. The house looked the same as always, quiet, still, the curtains slightly parted the way I'd left them. No broken windows. No signs of struggle. No car I didn't recognize parked nearby. But the stillness felt wrong. Too deliberate. I stepped out of the car but didn't move right away. I listened. Really listened. The only sounds were the chirping of distant birds and the faint hum of traffic from the main road. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. Yet the fear in my stomach stayed. I dialed Marisol again while walking toward the house, each step heavy. Voicemail. I tried the back door first, the one she said she was near before the call cut. The handle was cold under my fingers. Locked. I swallowed. Maybe she got out. Maybe she ran and forgot to message me. Maybe her phone died. Or maybe. I cut off the thought quickly. No. Not until I checked everything. I moved to the front door. My keys jingled faintly as I slipped them in, holding my breath as I pushed the door open. A soft creak greeted me, the same familiar sound I heard every evening when I came home from work. Except now, it sounded like a warning. Marisol? I called softly. Silence. The living room was spotless, cushions fluffed, the coffee table wiped clean, remote aligned at the edge where I usually kept it. A faint lemon cleaner scent hung in the air. She'd clearly started her work. But her cleaning bag sat open on the floor, gloves half out, as if she'd dropped everything in the middle of a task. I stepped in slowly, closing the door behind me. I tried to keep my breathing quiet, almost shallow. Every sense in my body was alert, searching for any hint of movement. My eyes scanned the staircase. Nothing. Marisol? I tried again, my voice barely above a whisper. Still nothing. I moved through the hallway, glancing into each room, dining room, guest room, bathroom. All clean. All quiet. But as I approached the stairs, I noticed something. A faint indentation on the carpet of the first step. Not large, just enough to break the smooth fibers she'd vacuumed earlier. Someone had gone up. My throat tightened. I knew the house well enough to understand its sounds, the clicks, the groans, the way air moved when a window was open. But right then, the air upstairs felt still. Heavy. Like it was waiting. Halfway up the stairs, I paused and looked at the framed picture on the landing. The one of me and Mark. We were smiling, arms wrapped around each other. That was before things turned cold between us. Before the late nights. Before the locked phone. Before the secrets. I'd kept that picture up out of habit more than love. But seeing it now made my skin crawl. Because the first thought that hit me was not of a burglar or a stranger. It was of him. Of how he still had a spare key, even though he'd forgotten to return it after he left. Of how he used to show up unannounced during our separation, trying to convince me to talk. Of how the last argument we'd had ended with him slamming the door so hard a nail popped from the hinge. He was unpredictable when he was angry. And lately, he'd been very angry. I reached the top of the stairs, breath held tight in my chest. The bedroom door was slightly open. And I could swear I saw a shadow move on the other side. For a moment, I didn't move. I stood at the top of the stairs completely still, my hand hovering in the empty air like I was afraid it would touch something invisible. The shadow behind the bedroom door didn't move again, but the memory of it, just a faint slip of darkness, clung to me like a cold finger tracing my spine. I swallowed hard. Hello? My voice was barely more than breath. Nothing answered. The house was so silent I could hear the soft ticking of the clock downstairs, each second falling like a drip of water. I took one slow step toward my bedroom. The carpet beneath my feet felt too soft, too quiet. My fingers were shaking as I reached out. Before pushing the door open, I listened again, really listened. A breath. Or maybe I imagined it. I pushed gently. The door swung inward with the softest squeak. My bedroom was dim, the curtains half pulled, letting in a narrow beam of daylight that fell across the bed. The room looked untouched. Pillows in place. Blanket folded. Jewelry tray still neatly arranged on the dresser. But the air felt disturbed. as if someone had just been there. I stepped inside slowly, scanning, behind the door, near the closet, towards the bathroom. Nothing. But then, on the floor, near the foot of the bed, I saw it. A faint footprint. Not mine. Not Marisol's. Larger. Heavier. Pressed into the carpet as if someone had stood there for a while. My throat tightened. Mark? I whispered before I could stop myself. Even saying his name out loud made my stomach sink. I hated that my mind kept circling back to him, but feared as that, it pushes you toward the most familiar danger. I turned toward the closet. The door was closed, but slightly crooked, like someone rushed to shut it. I took one step forward. Then, I heard it. A soft exhale. From inside. My chest constricted so tightly I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands tingled. Every sound in my head went silent except for my pulse slamming like fists against a locked door. I reached for the closet door, slowly, carefully, my fingertips brushing the wood. Before I could pull it open, something touched my ankle. I jumped back with a small cry, heart dropping into my stomach. And then I saw her. Marisol. Half curled under the room's small vanity table, eyes wide, body trembling. Her hand had reached out, barely brushing me. "Miss," she whispered, voice cracking, "he's still here." I crouched down immediately, grabbing her shoulders. "Where? Are you hurt? What happened?" She shook her head with small, frantic movements. "I was cleaning, and I heard the floor upstairs creak. I thought maybe you came home early." But then, she swallowed hard. Then the footsteps got louder, and I heard the closet door close. I tried to run but... Her breath caught. He came out. Her eyes flicked to the closet, filled with raw fear. My heart stopped. "What do you mean he came out? Did you see his face?" She nodded. Her fingers clutched mine so hard it almost hurt. I didn't know who he was. But he knew you." Her voice dropped. "He said your name?" My chest tightened painfully. "Marisol, what did he look like?" She hesitated, her eyes darting again to the closet door. "He was tall. Broad shoulders. Dark hair. Maybe early 40s. He looked angry." I felt the words before she even said them. "He said, she'll come home. She has to." A cold, sick wave rolled through me. It was Mark. It had to be. I stood up slowly, pulling Marisol with me. She clung to my arm like a terrified child. I glanced toward the closet again. The room had gone so quiet it felt suffocating. And then, with a soft, barely there click, the closet door latch shifted. On its own. By less than an inch. Just enough to tell me someone was holding the handle from the inside. Someone who had been listening to every word. The latch shifting was such a small sound, tiny, almost polite, but it shot through my body like a bolt. I felt Marisol flinch beside me, her nails digging into my arm. My breath caught in my chest, held hostage by the silence that followed. I forced myself not to stagger backward, not to look away. Whoever was in that closet was waiting. Listening. Calculating. I leaned down, my lips close to Marisol's ear. "We're leaving." Slowly. No sudden moves. She nodded, her face pale and tight with fear. I took her hand, guiding her gently toward the bedroom door. Every step felt painfully loud, even though we were moving as lightly as we could. The carpet muffled our steps, but in my mind, every footfall echoed like a drum. When we reached the threshold, I exhaled slowly for the first time since entering the room. Then, a creak. Low. Deliberate. The closet door had opened. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My instincts screamed not to. Instead, I pulled Marisol into the hallway with me, pretending, hoping, that if he thought we didn't notice him coming out, he wouldn't panic or lash out. But halfway down the hall, I made the mistake of glancing over my shoulder. He stood in the doorway of my bedroom. Not fully visible, just the outline of a broad figure, one hand braced against the doorframe, head slightly tilted as if studying us. I didn't need a clear view to know. It was Mark. The shape of him. The posture. The silent tension he carried like armor. "Keep walking," I whispered, almost choking on the words. We reached the top of the stairs. Marisol trembled so badly she nearly missed a step, and I held her elbow, steadying her. The staircase suddenly felt impossibly long, each step too steep, too slow, too far from the safety of the door. Halfway down, I heard the softest thud behind us. A footstep. My lungs tightened. My fingers curled around the banister. I didn't look back again. I didn't need to. I knew that sound better than my own heartbeat. I'd heard it during late-night arguments, during his angry pacing, during the months when silence between us had become a threat instead of peace. We reached the bottom of the stairs. The front door was only a few feet away. "Go," I whispered to Marisol. "Run." She hesitated, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." A lie. Maybe. I didn't know. But I needed her to move. I pushed her gently. Her steps were quick, stumbling. She reached the door and grabbed the handle. And froze. The deadbolt. Locked. The house had never felt so small. So airtight. So suffocating. My stomach dropped. When I left earlier, I hadn't locked that bolt. Someone else had. Behind me, another step. Closer. Slower. I rushed to Marisol's side, my fingers fumbling on the lock. Click. The moment it opened, I shoved the door outward. Cold air swept in, brushing my face like a gasp of freedom. "Go." She ran out first, stumbling onto the porch. I followed, stepping into the daylight. Only to hear his voice behind me. Calm. Measured. Too familiar. "Leaving without saying hello?" I froze. The sound of him, so normal, so casual, fell on my shoulders like a heavy weight. I turned slowly, just enough to see him through the doorway. Mark stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed loosely over his chest, jaw tight, eyes dark and unblinking. As if he hadn't just been hiding in my closet. As if this was all ordinary. "Mark," I whispered, barely able to form the word. He tilted his head. "We need to talk." But everything inside me knew. This wasn't a conversation. This was a confrontation I had been running from for months. And now, he had brought it right into my home. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The cold air from outside touched my face, but inside my chest everything felt hot, tight, compressed, like panic had wrapped itself around my ribs and refused to let go. Mark stood perfectly still on the staircase, the same way he used to stand in our kitchen when he wanted to make a point without raising his voice. Arms folded. Shoulders stiff. Eyes unblinking. His posture said everything. "You're not walking away from me." Marisol hovered a few feet behind me in the yard, clutching her phone with trembling hands. She looked torn, wanting to help but terrified. I lifted a hand behind me slightly, signaling her not to come back inside. "Mark," I said, my voice scraping out of my throat. "You can't be here." He took one slow step down the stairs. Then another. "Why?" he asked simply. "It's still my house too." "It's not," I said sharply. "You moved out. You chose to." He didn't blink. "I didn't choose anything. You pushed me out." That familiar twist of guilt tightened in my stomach. That was his pattern, turn the blame around, twist it, hand it back to me like a gift wrapped in shame. But this time, something inside me cracked in the opposite direction. I stepped backward onto the porch. "Stay where you are, Mark." He paused at the bottom of the staircase, his jaw clenching. "You're afraid of me now? After everything we've been through?" I swallowed. "You were hiding in my closet." His expression didn't change. Not even a flinch. Not a sign of embarrassment or apology. He just watched me like I was being dramatic. "I was waiting to talk," he said. "In a closet?" My voice shook with disbelief. "With the cleaning lady calling me in tears?" He shrugged slightly. "She startled too easily. I didn't mean to scare her." Jesus. The calmness in his tone was more terrifying than any shouting could have been. I felt Marisol inch closer behind me, not stepping into the house but near enough to hear. Mark's eyes flicked toward her. "She shouldn't have been here." "She was doing her job," I shot back. "A job I hired her for. I didn't need your permission." His jaw tightened. "That's the problem. You're making decisions like I don't matter." I felt heat rise in my chest, anger mixing with fear. "You don't get to break into my house and talk about feeling excluded." His voice dropped lower. "I didn't break in. I used my key." "So you admit you still have it?" He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "But I saw it." That tiny crack in his confidence. Then he lifted his chin. "I needed to talk to you. And every time I try, you run, or you hang up, or you disappear. You don't get to follow me into my home. You don't get to stand in the dark and wait for me like..." "Like what?" he cut in. A beat of silence hung between us. He wanted me to say it. But I couldn't, not with that look on his face, rigid and unreadable. Instead, I took another slow step backward off the porch until my feet touched the grass. The daylight felt like a shield. The open space behind me like a lifeline. "Mark," I said carefully, "I want you to leave." He didn't move. I tried again, louder this time. "Leave. Now." His eyes hardened. "If you walk away from this conversation, if you involve strangers in our business, you'll regret it. That's enough." A new voice broke through the standoff. It was Mr. Daly, my elderly neighbor, who had stepped out onto his porch with a small frown, holding a garden hose. He looked between us, then at Marisol's pale face, then back at Mark. "Everything all right over there?" he called. Mark's jaw tightened. He hated scenes. Hated public tension. Hated being watched. For the first time, he looked unsure. I met his eyes. "Leave, Mark. Or I'm calling the police." A muscle in his cheek twitched. He took a breath, sharp, angry, and stepped backward into the house. Then he grabbed something from the entryway table. I couldn't see what. He slipped out the back door, disappearing from sight without another word. The moment he was gone, my legs nearly gave out from the release of tension. Marisol rushed toward me, her face overwhelmed with worry. "Miss, we must report this. He's not well." I stared at the back of the house, trembling. Because I knew she was right. But I also knew Mark. And reporting him would turn this into a storm I wasn't sure I was ready for. Still, something had to change. Something already was. This wasn't just fear. This was the beginning of a truth I had ignored for too long. That afternoon felt like it stretched into an entire lifetime. Every time a floorboard creaked or a car passed by the house, I felt my entire body tense. Even after Mark left, the air inside the house felt contaminated with his presence, his anger, his entitlement, the quiet menace he carried like a second skin. Marisol sat with me on the couch, refusing to leave until she felt I was safe. Her hands shook every time she picked up her phone, as though replaying the moment she saw him emerge from the closet. She kept glancing at the windows, checking the locks. Miss, she said finally, voice trembling, men like him, they don't stop unless someone stops them. I knew what she meant. But hearing it said out loud made my stomach twist with something deeper than fear, shame. Shame that I had allowed things to escalate this far. Shame that I hadn't confronted Mark sooner. Shame that Marisol had been dragged into chaos that wasn't hers. I'm so sorry, I whispered. You shouldn't have gone through that. It's not your fault, she said firmly. He was like a storm waiting inside the house. Anybody would have been scared. A storm. That's exactly what Mark had always been, quiet until suddenly violent in ways that didn't leave bruises but left everything else bruised. My confidence. My self-worth. My sense of safety. A knock on the door made both of us jump. But it was only Mr. Daly. He stepped inside slowly when I opened the door a crack, his eyes warm with concern. Saw him leave out the back. Didn't like his look. You sure you're all right? I nodded, though the word all right felt far too generous. Thank you for stepping in earlier. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't. He shook his head. No need to thank me. A man shouldn't be sneaking around a woman's house like that, ex-husband or not. I felt that word ex hit me like a reminder of something unfinished. Our divorce papers were still sitting in a drawer upstairs, and signed on his end. Not because he didn't have them, but because he refused to. He always claimed he needed time to think, which was his way of saying he didn't want the control to end. Do you need me to call someone? Mr. Daly asked. I hesitated. Call someone. As in, the police. My chest felt heavy with indecision. My mind went over all the consequences, Mark's temper, his retaliation, the way he might twist the story. The endless back and forth it would create. The threat he made. If you involve strangers in our business, you'll regret it. A chill ran through me. I'll think about it, I whispered. Both of them stayed with me for another hour. Mr. Daly checked the doors, the windows, even the backyard to see if Mark had doubled back. Marisol didn't leave until her husband arrived, and even then she gave me a long, earnest hug before going. You need someone with you tonight, she insisted. But I shook my head. I'll be fine. A lie I told because I didn't want to burden anyone else. Because admitting I needed someone meant admitting how scared I really was. Once they were gone, the house grew painfully quiet. I walked through each room, making sure everything was locked. My bedroom was the hardest. The closet, the same one he had hidden in, stood there silently, as if waiting for me to open it. I forced myself to. Just clothes. Shoes. A few boxes. But it felt different. Violated. Like the air inside still held his breath. I closed it again and leaned my forehead against the doorframe, feeling the exhaustion of holding myself together all day. Then I noticed something. On the dresser. An old envelope. At first I thought it was just a piece of mail, but the moment I picked it up, my fingers recognized the handwriting. Mark's. Messy. Sharp. Controlling. My heart began to hammer. He had left it on purpose. A message. A warning. Or both. My fingers trembled as I slid the letter out. Inside, a single sheet of paper. 8 words. If you try to replace me, you'll regret it. My breath caught. My knees weakened. This wasn't just about reconciliation. This wasn't just about anger. This was possession. This was a man who refused to let go. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the paper shaking in my hands. I knew then, this wasn't going away on its own. He wasn't going to walk away quietly. And whether I was ready or not, the next step would change everything. For both of us. I didn't sleep the night before the board meeting. How could I? My mother's warning kept pounding through my mind like thunder trapped in a small room. He's hiding something dark, something about your identity. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, calm, polished, rehearsed. A face that had never cracked, never trembled, never told me the truth. And that terrified me more than any betrayal could. So when dawn finally crept in, painting the sky with the coldest gray I had ever seen, I was already dressed, already wide awake, already braced for a war I wasn't sure I could win, but knew I had to fight. The meeting was at 9 a.m. By 7:15, I was standing outside my mother's apartment. She opened the door immediately. "You didn't sleep," she said. "You didn't either," I whispered. She gave a humorless smile. "It's going to be a long day." I nodded and stepped inside. She was already dressed, her face composed, hair pinned back with the kind of precision only fear could sharpen. "Mom, what exactly is Dad afraid of? What does he think is going to happen if I speak today?" She hesitated. And that hesitation hurt worse than any answer. "Mom." I stepped closer. "You said he's been hiding something about my identity. Just tell me." A knock cut through the air. A sharp, urgent knock. Mom froze. And right then, I knew. I knew who it was. She opened the door slowly. And there he stood. My father. Not the corporate tyrant. Not the manipulator. Not the man who'd spent years molding me like clay. No. The man standing there now looked scared. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. "No," Mom answered immediately. He exhaled shakily. Then his eyes shifted to me. "Please. Just for 5 minutes." I didn't speak. I didn't trust myself. Mom looked at me. Her eyes asked, "Do you want this?" And mine answered, "I need the truth." She stepped aside. Dad walked in, closing the door behind him with a soft click that somehow echoed like a slam. He stood in the middle of the living room, wringing his hands, a gesture I had never seen from him in my entire life. "I know you're planning something today," he said, eyes locked on mine. "And I know you're angry. You have every right to be." That sentence hit me. Because it was the closest thing to an apology he'd ever given. But I didn't soften. I waited. He swallowed hard. "I've made mistakes," he said quietly. "More than you know." Mom scoffed. "Mistakes? That's what you call this?" I turned to her. Her voice was trembling. Dad sighed and looked at me again. "You want the truth? Fine. You'll get it. But not here. Not without context." He reached into his coat. Mom stepped forward instantly. "Don't you dare pull anything in front of her?" He raised his palms. "It's not what you think." He pulled out a small, worn envelope. Yellowed at the edges. My name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. He held it out toward me. "I've kept this for 24 years, he whispered. "Today, you need to read it." My heart froze. "What is this?" I asked. His voice cracked. "It's from your biological father." The room went silent. Completely, painfully silent. My mother's breath hitched sharply. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't do this to her." But Dad's face changed. A mixture of guilt and something deeper. Something like sorrow. "She deserves to know," he said. My knees nearly gave out. I have a biological father?" I whispered. Mom closed her eyes tightly. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Dad nodded slowly. "Yes." I stared at the envelope. It felt radioactive, like touching it would detonate my entire life. "When were you planning to tell me?" I asked, voice breaking. Dad swallowed. "When you were older," he said softly. "When it was safe." Safe? I repeated. What does that mean? He took a slow breath. Your biological father was a dangerous man, sweetheart. Not just reckless, dangerous. The room swayed. I shook my head. You said he was dead. Dad flinched. I said what I had to say to protect you. Mom stepped closer to me. He didn't die, she whispered. He disappeared. A chill ran through my spine. Disappeared? I whispered. What does that even mean? Dad closed his eyes. It means he was running from people who wanted him gone. And when he vanished, your mother and I made a choice. We changed our identities. We moved. We built a new life. And I married her so you could be protected with my name. I felt like my lungs had been punched empty. Identity. Protection. A new life. My entire childhood felt like it had been flipped over, revealing secrets crawling underneath. So this whole empire, this company, this name. I pointed between us with shaking hands. It's not even real? Dad didn't argue. He just stood there, absorbing the blow. You lied to me, I said hoarsely. My entire life. I kept you alive, he whispered. And now, Mom added, the people connected to your past, they've resurfaced. My heart stopped. Dad stepped closer. There are people watching the company. Watching us. If you go public today, if you draw attention, you could put all of us in danger. The silence was suffocating. What people? I asked. Dad exchanged a look with Mom. A look full of fear. The ones who were hunting him, Mom whispered. My blood turned to ice. Is he still alive? I whispered. Dad didn't answer. And that silence told me everything. My biological father wasn't a ghost. He wasn't gone. He was out there. Somewhere. Possibly watching. Possibly waiting. Possibly coming back. And suddenly, the board meeting felt like the smallest problem in my life. Dad extended the envelope again. Read this, he said quietly. Then decide if exposing me is worth the consequences. Mom turned to him sharply. Stop guilt-tripping her. Dad's voice hardened. I'm not guilt-tripping her. I'm trying to save her. My legs trembled. My voice was barely a whisper. So, what do I do now? Dad looked straight into my eyes. You choose, he said. Between truth and safety. I stared at the envelope. At my mother. At the man who raised me. And I knew one thing for certain. Nothing about my life would ever be the same after today.